Kravok adjusted his ceremonial robes for the 15th time in the past hour, wondering if the ancient fabric would finally give up and disintegrate from all the nervous tugging. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council stretched before him like a vast amphitheater of impending doom, its towering spires and holographic displays pulsing with the energy of 1,000 different civilizations. Nervous, Counselor? The voice belonged to Zefina, a sleek Vorthak diplomat, whose purple scales shimmered with barely contained amusement. Her 4 eyes tracked his fidgeting with predatory precision. Nervous? Me? Kravok's laugh came out more like a strangled wheeze. Why would I be nervous about declaring war on the most unpredictable species in the galaxy? What could possibly go wrong? The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a representative of the mighty Keltheran Empire, trembling like a newborn grub before what should have been a routine military declaration. But then again, nothing involving humans was ever routine. Across the hall, Thyman of the Nexari Federation was reviewing his notes with the intensity of someone cramming for their final exams. His tentacles moved in rapid, anxious patterns as he scrolled through data pad after data pad. Still reviewing Earth's military capabilities, Thyman? Kravok called out, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. For the 17th time, yes. Thyman's reply carried a hint of panic that didn't inspire confidence. And each time I read it, it makes less sense. How does a species that discovered fire barely 12,000 years ago manage to reverse-engineer quantum tunneling technology in just 6 months? Zefina's laugh was like breaking glass. You're overthinking this, old friend. They're a young species. Primitive. Emotional. This will be over before their next solar cycle. Primitive? Kravok raised what passed for eyebrows on his reptilian features. These are the same primitives who turned a children's game called rock, paper, scissors into a legitimate diplomatic protocol. When Ambassador Grex tried to establish trade relations, they convinced him to settle territorial disputes using something called thumb wrestling. The memory still stung. Ambassador Grex, pride of the Vangorian military, defeated by a human child who couldn't have been more than 10 cycles old. The footage had gone viral across 17 star systems. That was an isolated incident, Zefina insisted, though her scales had shifted to a slightly paler shade of purple. Isolated? Thyman's tentacles froze mid-motion. What about the Boraxian incident? A collective shudder ran through the nearby council members. The Boraxian incident had become required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy, filed under what not to do when negotiating with humans. The Boraxians, known throughout the galaxy for their logical approach to everything, had arrived at Earth with a perfectly reasonable proposition: they'd surrender half their planet's resources, and they would be allowed to continue existing. Standard procedure. Worked on every other species they'd encountered. Except humans, apparently, don't read the standard procedures manual. Instead of the expected capitulation, the humans had responded with something they called memes. Within 72 hours, Boraxian Admiral Krex 9 had become the laughingstock of the galactic networks. His image superimposed with various Earth animals and ridiculous captions in hundreds of languages. The coup de grace came when human hackers managed to reprogram every Boraxian ship's communication system to play something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" at maximum volume for 6 straight days. The Boraxians retreated, not from military defeat, but from what their official reports described as psychological warfare of unprecedented creativity and annoyance. The humans call it getting rickrolled, Kravok muttered, remembering the briefing. Our intelligence department still doesn't understand what it means, but they've classified it as a weapon of mass embarrassment. The great doors of the assembly hall began to open with a sound like distant thunder. Representatives from across the galaxy filed in, their various appendages, hover platforms and environmental suits, creating a parade of alien anxiety. Councillor Vex of the Andromedans floated by, her energy form flickering with what could only be described as cosmic nervousness. Has anyone actually calculated the statistical probability of success? She asked, her voice resonating through the translation matrix. "Our war computers have been running simulations for 3 months," replied General Korath, whose massive Titan frame made the floor vibrate with each step. "The results are confusing." "Confusing how?" Kravok asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "According to every logical parameter, we should achieve total victory within standard cycles. Our technology is superior, our numbers overwhelming, our strategy flawless." Korath paused, his mechanical voice dropping to what might have been a whisper. "But the computers keep generating error messages." "What kind of error messages?" "Does not compute, logic failure, and my personal favorite, are you absolutely sure about this?" The central dais began to glow, signaling the start of the formal session. Supreme Chancellor Morvex, ancient leader of the Council, materialized in a shower of golden light. His presence commanded immediate silence from the assembled representatives. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Morvex began, his voice carrying the weight of eons, "we gather today to address the human question once and for all." A murmur rippled through the assembly. The human question had been debated for decades, ever since first contact had gone so spectacularly wrong. It should have been simple. Standard first contact protocol arrive, demonstrate superior technology, demand submission, integrate new species into galactic civilization. A process refined over millions of years and thousands of species. But humans, it seemed, had never read the manual. Instead of cowering before the might of the Galactic Council's first contact vessel, they had responded with something called memes and reaction videos. Within hours, footage of the contact ship had been edited into what they called remix compilations and shared across their primitive global network. The Council's dignified announcement of their superiority had been auto-tuned into something called a banger track and had somehow become popular at human social gatherings. "The situation," Morvex continued, "has escalated beyond our initial projections." Kravok snorted quietly. That was the understatement of the millennium. What had started as routine first contact had evolved into a galactic comedy of errors that made the Council look like amateurs. The humans had treated every attempt at intimidation as entertainment. Death threats became memes. Military demonstrations became YouTube videos with titles like "Aliens Try to Scare Humans," "Gone Wrong, Wholesome Ending." When the Council had sent a formal declaration of war, complete with holographic displays of their vast armadas and superior weaponry, the humans had responded with a single image: a cartoon frog drinking tea with the caption, "That's nice, dear." Intelligence reports indicate, Morvex's voice grew grimmer, that humans have been analyzing our technology during these interactions. The hall fell silent. This was the part everyone had been dreading. In the past solar cycle, human technological advancement has accelerated at an unprecedented rate. They have reverse-engineered quantum mechanics, developed faster-than-light communication, and created artificial intelligence systems that our experts describe as disturbingly cheerful. Thymon's tentacles began trembling again. How disturbingly cheerful. Their AI systems respond to complex military queries with phrases like, "Oh, that's cute," and "You're going to need a bigger boat." The reference was lost on most of the Council, but those who had studied human culture shifted uncomfortably. Human references were never accidental. Furthermore, Morvex continued, his holographic form flickering slightly, "Our intelligence suggests that humans have been preparing." Preparing how? Zephyr's scales had now shifted to a distinctly worried shade of blue-purple. They appear to have weaponized their entertainment industry. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Councillor Vex's energy form crackling with anxiety. "I'm sorry," Kravok said slowly. "Did you just say they weaponized their entertainment industry?" "Our analysts believe they have been using their media productions to develop tactical scenarios. Films about alien invasions, they claim, are research projects. Their military strategists have been consulting with individuals they call science fiction writers and game developers." General Korath's mechanical voice carried a note of disbelief. "They're treating this like one of their recreational activities." "It gets worse," Morvex admitted. Our deep space monitors have detected massive construction projects in their outer system. When questioned, human authorities claimed they were building theme parks, recreational facilities. However, these theme parks appear to be heavily armed, strategically positioned, and capable of independent flight. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The humans weren't just preparing for war, they were turning it into a tourist attraction. "There's more," Morvex said, and Kravok wondered if his day could possibly get any worse. "We have intercepted human communications regarding something they call Operation Big Fun." The name alone was enough to send chills through the assembly. Human operations with innocent names had a disturbing tendency to end in catastrophe for everyone involved. "What do we know about this operation?" Zefina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very little. The communications are heavily encrypted using a code our best cryptographers describe as annoyingly clever. What we do know is that it involves massive resource allocation, coordination with their entertainment and technology sectors, and something they refer to as the ultimate plot twist." Kravok felt his stomach drop into his boots. Humans and plot twists were a combination that had given galactic strategists nightmares for decades. Perhaps, Thyman suggested hopefully, we could reconsider this course of action. Open diplomatic channels? Maybe try the rock, paper, scissors thing? Morvex's holographic form solidified, taking on an expression of grim determination. "The die has been cast. The Council has voted. We cannot appear weak before the galaxy. But what if we lose?" The question came from somewhere in the back of the assembly, voiced by someone brave enough to speak the unspeakable. "Lose?" General Korath's mechanical laughter boomed through the hall. "To humans? They still fight wars with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Their most advanced ships barely qualify as interplanetary. What could they possibly do to us?" As if summoned by his words, an aide rushed into the hall, their multiple limbs flailing in panic. They whispered something urgent into Morvex's audio receptors. The Supreme Chancellor's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to something approaching panic. "What is it?" Kravok asked, though part of him really didn't want to know. "We've just received a transmission from Earth," Morvex announced, his voice strangely flat. "It appears to be a response to our declaration of war. And—" Morvex paused, consulting his datapad with the expression of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "They've invited us to what they call a potluck dinner and asked if we have any dietary restrictions." The silence that followed was deafening. "They want to feed us?" Zefina's scales had now shifted to a color that didn't exist in any known spectrum. The message includes detailed instructions for bringing side dishes and something called a playlist contribution. They've also asked if anyone plays what they term party games. Kravok slowly sat down, his legs no longer able to support his weight. "They're treating our declaration of war as a dinner invitation." "It gets stranger," Morvex continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone reading their own death sentence. "They've attached a video message." The great screens around the assembly hall flickered to life, displaying what appeared to be a human female with short dark hair and an unnervingly cheerful expression. She wore what human records indicated was casual attire and stood in what appeared to be a food preparation area. "Hi there, galactic neighbors," the human began, waving enthusiastically at the camera. "Sarah Martinez here, speaking on behalf of Earth's Welcome Committee. We got your adorable little war declaration, and we just have to say how thoughtful." Kravok felt his species equivalent of a migraine beginning to form. "We know traveling across the galaxy is super tiring, so we figured you might be hungry when you get here. We're throwing a little get-together to welcome you properly. Nothing fancy, just a casual galaxy meets Earth kind of thing." The human paused to sip from a beverage container decorated with cartoon animals. "Now, we know you're probably expecting the whole cowering in fear thing, but honestly that sounds exhausting for everyone involved. Instead, we thought we'd try something called aggressive hospitality. It's like regular hospitality, but with more enthusiasm and better snacks. Several council members began making what could only be described as whimpering sounds. We've prepared a few surprise activities for when you arrive. Fair warning, we take our party games very seriously here on Earth. We hope you're ready for laser tag karaoke and something we like to call full contact diplomacy. The human's smile grew wider, and Kravok realized it wasn't entirely friendly. Oh, and one more tiny thing, we've been chatting with some of your former enemies and wow, you guys have made quite an impression across the galaxy. The Zephyrians send their regards, by the way. Lovely people. Very grateful for the liberation. The color drained from every face, scale and energy pattern in the assembly. The Zephyrians had been conquered by the Council 3 centuries ago and integrated into the Galactic Order. How were humans communicating with them? Anyway, we can't wait to meet you all in person. Fair warning though, our hospitality can be a bit overwhelming. We've been practicing. The transmission ended with the human waving cheerfully before the screen went black. In the silence that followed, Kravok heard the distinct sound of Thymon's tentacles hitting the floor in what could only be described as a feint. Supreme Chancellor, General Koroth's voice had lost all of its earlier confidence. What did she mean by liberation? Morvex was frantically consulting multiple data pads, his holographic form flickering with processing strain. I'm reading reports of communication blackouts in 17 subjugated systems. No responses to standard check-ins. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures. What kind of energy signatures? The kind that suggest massive infrastructure changes, reconstruction, fortification, and Morvex paused, his expression growing pale. Celebration. Celebration? We're detecting what appears to be festival activity across multiple systems, parties, gatherings, and something our analysts describe as suspiciously organized fun. Kravok stood up slowly, his mind racing through the implications. They're not just preparing for war. They're organizing a resistance movement. Using parties? Zephyr's voice cracked. Think about it, Kravok said, his voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. What better way to coordinate rebellion than through social gatherings? What better way to spread information than through entertainment? What better way to unite former enemies than through shared hospitality? The truth hit the assembly like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been ignoring the Council's threats. They had been networking. For decades, the Council had dismissed human culture as primitive entertainment. But entertainment, it turned out, was a universal language. Music, stories, games, and food had somehow become the foundation of the largest resistance movement in galactic history. Sir, another aide rushed in, this one clearly on the verge of panic. We're receiving similar transmissions from the Zephyrian homeworld, the Andorian colonies, and the Nexari Federation territories. They're all inviting us to parties. Morvex's holographic form began to flicker more rapidly. How many systems? 200 and counting, sir, and they all seem to be coordinating their festivities. The realization settled over the assembly like a toxic fog. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been preparing for the biggest party in galactic history. And somehow they had convinced half the galaxy to help them throw it. What do we do? Thymon asked weakly, having recovered enough to rejoin the conversation. General Koroth's mechanical voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. I'm beginning to understand why our computers kept generating error messages. Which were? Are you absolutely sure about this? As if on cue, another transmission arrived. This time, the human appeared to be standing in what looked like a command center, but one decorated with balloons and streamers. Oh, hi again. It was the same cheerful human from before. Sarah Martinez, back with a quick update. We just wanted to let you know that our party planning is going great. We've got RSVPs from, about half the galaxy now. She paused to check what appeared to be a list written on colorful paper. The Zephyrians are bringing their famous crystalline music synthesizers, the Andromedans are providing light shows, and the Nexari have volunteered to handle the decorations. Oh, and the Boraxians want to DJ. Who knew they had such a good sense of humor? The council members began to realize that their perfectly planned war had somehow been transformed into the galaxy's most elaborate social event. We're still working out the final details, but we think we've got something really special planned. Think of it as less galactic conquest and more cultural exchange program with explosions. The human's smile turned absolutely predatory. See you soon. Don't forget to bring snacks. The transmission ended, leaving the assembly in stunned silence. Kravok looked around at his fellow council members, taking in their expressions of panic, confusion, and dawning realization. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "I believe we may have made a terrible mistake." "What do you mean?" Zephina asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Kravok replied, adjusting his robes one final time. "We just declared war on a species that has somehow convinced our enemies to throw them a welcome party." And somewhere in the back of his mind he could almost hear the sound of human laughter echoing across the galaxy. 3 standard cycles later, Admiral Vortex stood on the bridge of the Dreadnought Annihilator, watching his fleet approach the Sol system with all the enthusiasm of someone heading to their own execution. The irony of the ship's name wasn't lost on him, considering their current situation. "Status report," he commanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "Sir," Commander Raylak consulted his instruments with the expression of someone reading bad news. "Long-range sensors are detecting approximately 4,000 vessels in Earth's orbital space." 4,000? Vortex felt his heart skip a beat. Intelligence suggested they had maybe 50 operational craft. "Yes, sir, about that." Raylak's antenna twitched nervously. "These don't appear to be military vessels. Our computers are classifying them as party barges." Through the main viewport, the Sol system came into view, and Vortex immediately understood why his invasion fleet had been getting increasingly worried communications from High Command. Earth's orbital space looked like the galaxy's biggest carnival had exploded. Massive platforms blazed with lights that could be seen from several astronomical units away. Ships from dozens of different species floated in what appeared to be organized formations, but instead of battle lines, they seemed to be arranged for optimal viewing angles of whatever spectacle the humans had prepared. "Sir," Communications Officer Blint announced, his voice cracking slightly, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Control." "Put it through," Vortex sighed, bracing himself for whatever fresh nightmare awaited them. The screen flickered to life, showing a different human this time. A male with greying hair and what humans called a mustache, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform decorated with colorful patches and tiny lights. "Ahoy there, Galactic Council fleet," the human announced with disturbing cheerfulness. "Admiral Jake Morrison here, Earth Defense Coordinator and Head of Party Planning. Welcome to Sol System. Hope you brought your appetites." Vortex stared at the screen, trying to process the concept of a military officer whose duties apparently included party planning. "We've got your accommodations all set up. Beautiful view of Earth, close to the refreshment stations and front row seats for tonight's main event." Main event? Vortex found himself asking before he could stop himself. Admiral Morrison's grin widened. "Oh, you're going to love this. We call it the Galactic Freedom Festival. Think of it as liberation with fireworks, democracy with dancing, and revolution with really good catering." Behind Morrison, Vortex could see what appeared to be a command center that had been decorated for a celebration. Beings from various species were working alongside humans, and everyone seemed to be wearing party hats. "Now, I know you folks came here expecting a good old-fashioned space battle, but we thought we'd try something different. See, we've been chatting with your former subjects, and they had some really interesting stories to share about Council hospitality." Morrison's expression shifted slightly, the cheerful mask slipping to reveal something much more dangerous underneath. Turns out a lot of folks in this galaxy have been waiting a very long time for someone to throw the Council a proper farewell party. The transmission cut to a wide view of Earth's orbital space, and Vortex felt his remaining courage evaporate entirely. The 4,000 vessels weren't just party barges. They were party barges armed with weapons technology he didn't recognize, organized in formations that suggested military precision, and crewed by representatives from every species the Council had conquered in the past millennium. Tactical analysis, he ordered weakly. Sir, Tactical Officer Grendix's voice was barely above a whisper. Our computers can't get a solid read on their capabilities. The energy signatures are inconsistent with known technology. Inconsistent how? They appear to have combined recreational equipment with military hardware. We're detecting weapons systems integrated with sound amplification devices, shield generators powered by what appears to be disco lighting, and... Grendix paused, double-checking his readings. Sir, are those weapons platforms shaped like musical instruments? Through the tactical display, Vortex could make out massive structures that did indeed appear to be enormous guitars, drums, and something that might have been a cosmic saxophone. They've turned their defense grid into a concert stage, he muttered, feeling the last of his sanity slip away. Incoming transmission from the flagship, communications announced. It's Supreme Chancellor Morvex. The screen switched to show Morvex's holographic form, but the usually composed leader of the galactic government appeared to be having some kind of breakdown. His image flickered erratically, and his voice carried an edge of hysteria. Admiral Vortex, report. Have you engaged the enemy? Sir, Vortex began carefully. The situation is complex. Complex. How complex can it be? You have the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. They have a single primitive planet. Well, sir, about that single primitive planet, Vortex gestured toward the viewport. They appear to have friends. Morvex's holographic form solidified as he processed the tactical data being transmitted from Vortex's ship. The silence stretched for what felt like centuries. Admiral, Morvex's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Are you telling me that Earth has allied with our conquered territories? Not exactly allied, sir. It's more like they're hosting them. Hosting them? At a party, sir. A very large, very well-armed party. Another transmission interrupted them, this one apparently broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. The screen split to show multiple humans in what appeared to be various command centers around Earth. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted galactic citizens, announced a human female with elaborate blue hair. This is Maria Santis, Director of Earth's Department of Enthusiastic Diplomacy. Welcome to the first annual Galactic Liberation Day celebration. The view switched to show crowds of beings from hundreds of different species gathered on Earth's surface, all apparently engaged in festival activities. For too long, the Galactic Council has treated the galaxy like their personal empire, deciding who gets to exist and how. Well, Earth has a different philosophy. The camera panned across what appeared to be massive construction projects, but instead of military installations, they looked like the galaxy's most elaborate entertainment complexes. We believe in something called aggressive democracy. It's like regular democracy, but with more explosions and better music. On cue, fireworks began launching from Earth's surface, but these weren't ordinary fireworks. They were massive, coordinated displays that painted messages across the sky in dozens of different languages. Freedom is non-negotiable blazed across space in letters large enough to be read from orbit. Get ready to party followed in smaller, but equally bright text. Now, Maria continued, her cheerful tone taking on a distinctly menacing edge, we know the Galactic Council is probably feeling a bit left out right about now. Don't worry, we've prepared some special activities just for you. The view switched to show the orbital platforms, which were now revealing themselves to be far more than simple party venues. Massive weapon systems emerged from what had appeared to be decorative elements, but they maintained their festive appearance. We call these our freedom dispensers, Maria explained as the camera focused on a weapon platform shaped like a massive birthday cake. They're loaded with something we like to call democracy bombs. What, Vortex asked weakly, is a democracy bomb? His question was answered almost immediately as one of the platforms fired a test shot into empty space. Instead of a conventional explosion, the projectile created a massive burst of light and sound that painted the message "Vote or Die" across the cosmos in 7 different languages. Each democracy bomb contains approximately 4,000 terabytes of historical data about democratic governments, 300 hours of educational entertainment about civil rights, and just enough explosive power to disable a dreadnought. Maria announced with the enthusiasm of someone describing a pleasant hobby. "They're going to educate us to death," Commander Relak observed with something approaching admiration. "The beauty of our approach," Maria continued, "is that it's completely voluntary. You can choose to participate in our Liberation Festival, or you can choose to be liberated involuntarily. We're flexible." Supreme Chancellor Morvex's holographic form was now flickering so rapidly it was difficult to make out his features. "This is impossible. Our intelligence indicated they were a primitive species." "Sir," came a new voice from the communication system, "this is Intelligence Director Quex. We may have made some errors in our assessment." "What kind of errors?" "Well, sir, it appears that when humans say they're just watching movies for entertainment, they're actually conducting advanced tactical research. When they claim to be playing games, they're running military simulations. And when they say they're having fun, they're apparently planning the overthrow of galactic civilization." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Humans had been preparing for this conflict since first contact, but they had disguised their preparations as leisure activities. Furthermore, Director Quex continued, his voice growing increasingly panicked, "Our analysis of human social media indicates they've been coordinating with resistance movements across the galaxy for decades. What we interpreted as entertainment sharing was actually intelligence gathering and network building." "How many networks?" Morvex demanded. "All of them, sir. Every subjugated species, every conquered world, every forced alliance. They've been in contact with all of them." Another transmission arrived, this one from Admiral Morrison again, but now he was standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a human vessel that definitely hadn't existed in any intelligence reports. "Sorry to interrupt your strategy session, folks, but we thought you might want to know that the party's about to start." Behind Morrison, the viewport showed the approach of the Council fleet, but it also showed something else. Hundreds of ships that had apparently been hiding in Earth's shadow were now moving into position. "Now, we know you probably weren't expecting this kind of reception, but Earth takes hospitality very seriously. We've prepared entertainment, refreshments, and some interactive activities we think you'll find educational." Morrison's smile took on a shark-like quality. "See, we've been studying galactic history, and we noticed a pattern. Every few centuries, some group decides they're in charge of everyone else. They build big fleets, conquer some planets, set up an empire, and then get comfortable." The human paused to sip from what appeared to be a beverage container. "The thing is, empires are kind of like parties that go on too long. Eventually, someone has to turn on the lights and tell everyone to go home." As if summoned by his words, every light on every platform around Earth suddenly blazed to full intensity, turning the local space into a blazing beacon visible from several star systems away. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Council, consider the lights officially turned on." What followed could only be described as the most polite military defeat in galactic history. The Council fleet found themselves surrounded not by hostile forces, but by what appeared to be an enormous block party. Ships from liberated worlds began broadcasting music, messages of freedom, and what humans called trash talk directly at the invasion force. The democracy bombs turned out to be exactly what they appeared to be, weapons designed to disable ships, while simultaneously broadcasting educational content about representative government, civil liberties, and the historical failures of authoritarian regimes. Within hours, half the council fleet had surrendered, not from fear of destruction, but from what their crews described as aggressive enlightenment and overwhelming friendliness. The other half found themselves invited to participate in what humans called diplomatic games, which turned out to be complex negotiations disguised as party activities, but with the implicit understanding that losing teams would be sent home with stern lectures about proper galactic citizenship. Admiral Vortex, finding his dreadnought disabled but intact, received a personal invitation to beam down to Earth's surface for what the humans called exit interviews. He found himself in a conference room that had been decorated with balloons and streamers, facing a panel of humans and representatives from formerly conquered species. So asked Sarah Martinez, who was apparently Earth's Director of Galactic Relations in addition to her party planning duties, "How are you feeling about the whole Galactic Empire thing now?" Vortex looked around the room, taking in the faces of beings whose worlds his people had conquered, whose freedom his government had stolen, whose lives his forces had disrupted. "Honestly," he said after a long pause, "tired, very, very tired." "That's completely normal," replied Dr. Susan Kim, identified as Earth's Chief of Therapeutic Democracy. "Maintaining an authoritarian government is exhausting work. All that oppression, all that fear-mongering, all that pretending you're better than everyone else. It's got to be emotionally draining. The good news," added another human, "is that we've got a comprehensive rehabilitation program. Think of it as Empire recovery therapy, but with better snacks and more group activities. What happens to us now?" Vortex asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Well," Sarah consulted what appeared to be a clipboard covered in glitter, "that depends. Are you interested in learning about representative government, civil rights, and the fascinating world of cooperative galactic citizenship? Do I have a choice?" "Of course you have a choice. That's the whole point of democracy." The human's smile was both reassuring and terrifying. "You can choose to participate in our educational programs and eventually return to your people as ambassadors of democratic reform, or you can choose to spend some quality time in our contemplation facilities while you think about your life choices." What are contemplation facilities? Think of them as minimum security resorts where you get to reflect on the errors of authoritarian governance while participating in group therapy and recreational activities. Vortex realized that humans had somehow managed to turn imprisonment into what sounded like a vacation, rehabilitation into entertainment, and galactic conquest into the universe's largest educational program. "The Council," he said weakly, "will never accept this." "Oh, about that," Sarah's expression brightened. "We received word about an hour ago that Supreme Chancellor Morvex has requested asylum on Earth. Something about wanting to explore the fascinating world of democratic governance and maybe try that thing where leaders actually serve the people instead of the other way around." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "The Galactic Council," Dr. Kim announced cheerfully, "has voted to dissolve itself and participate in Earth's Galactic Democratic Transition Program. Congratulations, Admiral Vortex. You're now a citizen of the Free Galaxy Coalition." "Free Galaxy Coalition?" "It's what we're calling the new government, same as the old government, but with more voting, better parties, and significantly less tyranny." Through the conference room window, Vortex could see the ongoing celebration. Beings from hundreds of species were participating in what appeared to be the largest cultural exchange in galactic history. Music, food, art, and ideas were being shared freely among peoples who had been kept separated by force for centuries. "This is insane," he muttered. "Yep," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "Completely, absolutely, totally insane. But it's good insane, you know, the kind of insane that leads to freedom, prosperity, and really excellent festivals." She stood up, extending what humans called a handshake toward him. "Welcome to the galaxy, Admiral. The real galaxy, where everyone gets a vote, everyone gets a voice, and everyone gets invited to the party." As Vortex reached out to accept the gesture, he could hear the sound of celebration echoing across space. Laughter, music, and the voices of billions of beings experiencing freedom for the first time in generations. The Galactic Council had voted for war against Earth. Earth had voted to end the Council. And somehow everyone was invited to the victory party. Outside, fireworks painted new messages across the cosmos: democracy harder than it looks but worth the effort, and next party, Andromeda Galaxy, brings snacks. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in his military career, Admiral Vortex found himself looking forward to what came next.